I bid you greetings of peace and goodness, my friends. You would think that after 2,000 years, people, nations, would get the message or understand. It's no longer an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That was the Old Testament idea of God. Jesus comes precisely to change all that, and he speaks about that in today's gospel. The greatest gift that Christians are given is the gift of love and the understanding of what that means. But our effective use of this powerful gift depends on our success or our failures of our lives. There's only one thing that can utterly destroy love, and that is hate. How do you learn to hate? Same way you're taught to love. We were taught to love. We were taught to hate. And parents, today, now, you too possess that same responsibility. It's up to you. Which do you teach your children? Who do you teach your children to hate? What do you teach your children to hate? Sadly, life offers us many opportunities to hate. Not just individual people, not just people that we perceive as being evil, although Jesus is concerned about that as well, and we're not even to hate those people, but also groups and classes and types of people as well. In the days when people owned their own wells, there were two farmers called James and John. They were good friends until there was a dispute over a piece of land that was between their adjacent properties. And they were unable to settle this issue among themselves, so they went to court about it. It was a long battle, and nearly all their neighbors were drawn into it and forced to take one side or another. In the end, the court decided in favor of John. While John was elated, James was bitter. So what did James do? He went and put poison in John's well. Not a fatal dose, but just enough to discolor the water and give it an obnoxious taste. Something like that happened to the water, to that West Virginia community we hear about. Of course, John was very angry. And he consulted with those neighbors who had been on his side in the court case, but many of them had grown weary of the litigation battle and refused to have anything more to do with the affair. Who could blame them? Some came to look at the well out of sheer curiosity. They could see some sort of gray substance at the bottom, and they looked at it with kind of a fascination. However, they went away without doing anything, only muttering terrible things about James, no less. Others were, however, not content just merely to look. They got long sticks and began to stir up the water so that they could see the effect of it for themselves. They gasped when they saw the water turn colors. Others were not even content to do that. They went so far as to dip their fingers into the water and taste it. Ugh. Bitter. Sickening. Many sympathized with John and declared that James should be made to pay for what he had done. They went even so far as to suggest to John that in retaliation, he should turn and poison James' well himself. That would teach James a lesson. John lapped up that support. He liked that idea. And he was about to go at night to drop some poison into James' well when a stranger arrived at his house. On hearing this story, the stranger agreed that it was pretty nasty, but he could not agree with the idea of retaliation and revenge. "What good would that do?" he said. "Poison is not a thing to play around with. If you begin to dabble in poison, it will enter your whole system, not just your well. I have a better idea. I'll show you in the morning." Well, his idea was to clean out John's well, and so he offered to help. It was with a great deal of reluctance and a feeling of defeat that John finally agreed, and it would take a long time. They would have to do without water, but in the meantime, for the first thing that they had to do was cut off the supply of water to the well. And that was a messy business, cleaning out all that mud and dirt and gunk and silt. It took them 2 whole days. Then they ran fresh water through it to flush it out and clean it. Several times they did that until they were quite sure that all the poison was gone. The stranger finally took a cup of water and drank it and declared, "It's very good. It's okay." John did likewise. He took a cup of water, but he was not convinced. He maintained that he could still taste the bitterness of that poison. To which the stranger replied, "Of course you do. Take it from me. The water is perfect. But you will continue to taste that bitterness of the poison until you do one more thing." "And what is that?" asked John. "You must forgive your neighbor James. You've gotten rid of the poison from the well, but the poison remains in you, in your mind and in your heart. Not until you let go of the bitterness and the resentment that you have and forgive James will that water taste sweet and good." That same evening, John went over to James and made peace with him. Immediately, the water from his well not only tasted good, but it also tasted sweet. And he had peace, and they became friends again. Hatred, retaliation, revenge, grudges, resentment are all poisons. And they never get the results we want, only harm us and no one else. You've heard that old axiom. It's like us drinking the poison and expecting the other person to get sick. Forgiveness and loving response is the only healthy and holy answer. Hatred is a very dangerous thing, and it can destroy us. We consume more energy in hating than in all other activities. Hatred creates a legacy of poison that we pass on to others. You know that song from South Pacific? You've got to be taught to hate and fear. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. We were taught, and we teach others, whether to love or to hate. the poison of bitterness and hostility and resentment that we feel we easily transfer onto others. It's amazing the poison and nastiness that exists in so many nice people. Just get them stirred up. You'll see. When we hate another, we give that person not only a distance from God, we begin to treat that person in a dehumanizing way. Would you hate the tabernacle? Of course not. The tabernacle is the house of Jesus. Every single person is a tabernacle. Every single person is a temple of God. The person we hate also has the power to rob us of our peace in mind and of our capacity to love. And they don't even have to know that they're doing it. We allow that to happen. Hatred never helps a situation. It merely tends to spread the poison. And yet it goes on all the time. Revenge, resentment, hatred. See it in the newspapers, on the media. Corporations against one another. Nations, politics, and sometimes, sadly, even the church. Christ's way is the better way. It's not the easy way. It's not easy to be a Christian. It calls for strength. It calls for toughness. Chesterton once said, Christianity has not been tried and found wanting. Christianity has been found hard and therefore left wanting. More than any other, the exhortation to love one's enemies has been left untried. So perhaps we too, Lent is coming, could make that our Lenten project. If only towards one person who may have poisoned the well of our lives in some way. We ourselves can be the greatest beneficiaries of this. It may take time, but it's worth it. But it does one other thing too. We have to decide to forgive. It doesn't happen automatically. It's an ongoing thing, and maybe day after day, we have to decide to forgive. We ourselves will be the greatest beneficiaries of that. In disputes that do not involve us directly, well, then we should try being reconcilers to those parties, not trying to stir things up and spread the poison further, as so many of us do. Thomas Merton once said, we help ourselves to rise up when we lift up our enemies. May the Lord grant you peace in ways that the world cannot.